Welcome, everyone. Last week, we talked about the radical power of oneness, and I didn't feel like it was complete. So, Radical Power of Oneness, Part 2. Because I do believe we're in a season right now where it's important for us to come together and not allow ourselves to be divided by the forces that actually need us to be divided. There are forces that need us to be sick, scared, and separate. And we refuse to be any of those, sick, scared, or separate. We recognize our oneness. Look at somebody close to you if you can, maybe lock eyes with them and just look at them and say, I am united with you in love, joy, and peace. Marianne Williamson said, love in your mind produces love in your life. This is the meaning of heaven. Fear in your mind produces fear in your life. This is the meaning of hell. And you can have heaven or you can have hell. And all of us have had some of both. And it is our ability to create either one that is the showing forth of our divinity. We are all divine beings, having a human expression and experience. And while we are, it's important for us to not ignore our emotions or our commotions, but be mindful of our devotions. What am I devoted to? I can emote and I can commote. That may not be a word, but we'll make it up. I can do both, but I am devoted to a higher way. I was asked just last evening, what are we doing? And I said, well, I can tell you what I'm not doing. What I refuse to do is to panic. I refuse to live in division and live in fear. I refuse to live in a state of constant anger, although anger is also not a bad emotion. In fact, it can be utilized as fuel, but it's important to mutate it before it mutates you. And more importantly, before it mutes your love and gets you into a place where you are unable to bring people into the circle, as Reverend Aileen just led us in that meditation, bringing people into that circle. When people draw a circle to push you out, draw a bigger circle to pull them in. You don't have to tell them that, by the way. You don't need to announce to them that you've done that. The ego wants you to announce how spiritual and loving you are. Just do it without even their knowledge, understanding within yourself that there's no boundaries. We live on a ball. I keep hearing people talk about boundaries, but there's no real boundaries. There's just the boundaries we've created, and those boundaries have bound us in incarceration and chains of separation. The ego needs separation to thrive. And the Spirit thrives in unity and in radical oneness. So I wrote this down. Oneness in your mind. This was after meditating on Marianne Williamson's quote. Oneness in your mind produces compassion in your life. This is the meaning of heaven. Separation in your mind produces violence in your life. This is the meaning of hell. So when we're talking about radical power, radical oneness, the word radical literally means to affect fundamental nature of something, and it's far-reaching and thorough. So when we're talking about being radical, we're talking about actually affecting the fundamental nature of things. I mentioned to you last week that, folks, let's just be honest about the history so that we can tell a new story. Until we face the history that we've had, which has been dominated by hymns, not hymns you sing in churches, but the reason it's called his story is because the root word for history is his. Can I get a witness, ladies? There's been a lot of dudes writing the story for a long time and dominating the environment. And it's been led by masculinity, and now we see as much as ever fragile masculinity on display. I've got to name this and change that and call this so that I can be great. Well, there may be power, but there's not greatness. There's a difference between power and greatness. You can be given power with a title, but greatness is earned with the way you treat other human beings. So radical the word actually means to change the fundamental or affect the fundamental nature of something. Power is the capacity or ability to directly influence the behavior of others or the course of events. And oneness creates a fundamental change in the nature of how we've been doing life, and it is far-reaching. I'm talking about creating a movement in this planet that is going to literally dismantle old systems and bring to life a new system. And some people think that this is political speech. I didn't get any really blowback from last week, but some people think this is political speech. But you need to understand, I'm not running for an office. This is me and you and us together standing as a prophetic voice in a time when the world needs to hear a different message than the same old, the same old environment that has helped to keep people bound for generations and millennia. It's held people down. Religion and government has held us back from being our true and authentic selves, and we've allowed it to happen, and the time has come for us to say, I won't allow this to happen in my life anymore. I choose to live from a higher standpoint. I choose to transcend what I'm seeing in the world and transform into the real me, the true, essential, original, divine person that I am. This is the power that we all have. And the oneness call is calling us to come together as a collective and create collective change, not just individual change. The church has been silent and or complicit long enough. And that includes New Thought churches, because we like to have our silos too. We want to get together in our New Thought churches in kumbaya and love and light. And we've been pretty much taught to not get involved or engage in the world in terms of social justice because we've been being told that is political. It is not political. What I'm talking about today is about humanity. It's about the earth. It's about a connection between the two. It's about the animals that are living on a planet that we've been destroying at our own convenience. This is spirituality. You might not think that it's spirituality, but it is spirituality. To resurrect within us an understanding that we're connected to the all. That is what oneness is. Now, you're not responsible for what anyone else does, but we are responsible as individuals and as a collective to be a resounding voice, a beckoning call, a voice of reason in a world that's not reasonable. I ask you this, and this is a rhetorical question. Do you think it's reasonable in the wealthiest country in the world for 140 million people, citizens of this country, to remain in poverty and lack and hungry? Do you think it is normal or natural that in a country where we have large buildings sitting empty, waiting for somebody to just make more money off of a piece of land and in a building, when we have massive buildings all over this country that are empty, and we still have veterans on the streets, we still have mothers and their children on the streets? There's something wrong when we're more concerned about our social media status, likes and loves, and whether TikTok is going to be banned or not, than we are about human beings who are literally starving to death this morning. There is something wrong when we have allowed that to be normalized in our society. And what are we going to do about it? Well, I mean, we could get angry and get hateful and throw stones at the people that are throwing stones at us, or we could choose to be the one who recognizes that the way the giant is slayed, by realizing that the giant is not real, it's just a facsimile of a belief and an agreement that we've had. I no longer agree to the way the United States of America has been. I don't agree to it. I opt out. I'm free from it. I choose to be a world citizen. Don't get quiet all at once. Saint Valentine was considered the patron saint of love. You know why that is? Because the system of his time was clamping down on that particular group of people in that particular part of the world and saying that people could no longer get married for love. They must get married within their tribe, and they must get married to people who could further their status. And Saint Valentine snuck out through the night to give marriage and union and blessing on unions between men and women and women and women and men and men. I don't know for sure that was all happening, but between people who loved each other, he decided to be love, even in the dark. He decided to stand as resistance against a system that was unfair and unjust. And he became known as the patron saint of love. When I pass from this life, I hope I'll get known as the patron saint of love. But because love is my religion. And it is my choice. But love is not passive. And oneness is not passive. Oneness doesn't sit in the seats and say it's not really happening. I'm going to ignore it and deny it because it's not really happening. That is a seat of privilege. My white brothers and sisters, I know you feel like I'm picking on you on a regular basis, but just because you're not feeling racism doesn't mean that it is not an institutionalized thing in this country. It is a systemic issue in this country, and it has been for a long time. My straight brothers and sisters, whatever that means, because all of us are crooked in some way. We got crooks and things. My straight brothers and sisters, just because you're not feeling the heat in regards to your marriage or your marriage rights, it does not mean that our gay and lesbian transgender brothers and sisters are not feeling that oppressive nature and energy right now. That's your seat of privilege and the seat that you've sat in for so long that you didn't realize it was privileged because you may not even like the seat. Everybody all right? See, oneness will influence our behavior. It'll change the course of events because we will change how we show up. Out of that power will come forth real change. What we've been hearing from leaders for a long time, they've been talking about change, and that's all they're wanting to leave in their pockets is change. Anybody with me? This United States of America, it's time for us to change the world. It's time for us to shift this thing. There is something wrong with the way we've been doing it, and I'm not going to lay blame on one particular person. If you think I'm laying blame completely on Donald Trump, y'all misunderstand that I'm not here to stand against a personality. I'm here to stand for a higher way of being. I'm here to stand for something that is better, a greater, more equitable and equal and loving and compassionate society. I don't have time to waste on people who change names of bodies of water to make themselves feel better. I don't have time to stand and try to resist that, because that's just a lower vibration. If you get down there in that lower vibration, you're going to be swimming with some sharks you didn't realize you'd be swimming with. Rise above it. Fly above it. Recognize the power that you have. Become the real change. Spiritual awareness leads to systemic change. See, if we don't change the hearts of people, if people's hearts do not change, then they're never going to influence authority on the mind. Then the mind doesn't change, and when the mind doesn't change, their behavior doesn't change. This is a clarion call for us to go into the heart and recognize the radical power of oneness. The current system stems from our agreement with the way things are. No, I don't agree with that. I didn't vote for that. See, this is further than the voting booth. This is further than waiting for every 2 years and every 4 years so that you can vote for some great leader. This is becoming the great leader that you were put here to be. This is becoming your authentic, powerful, and divine self. This is not waiting for someone else to do something that you see needs to be done. This is deciding to step to the forefront, and not with a picket sign and a separation wall, but to step to the forefront with a better idea. Instead of sitting at McDonald's on Monday mornings trying to solve the problems of the world over a McChicken or whatever it is you get, and sitting there and complaining about the way things are, how about we come up with a better solution? From the higher consciousness. How about we create something new and start showing that as an example? If we think that we can cure the divisive nature of our country without even curing the divisive nature of our churches, we've got another thing coming. If we think we can teach unity to our government when we can't even keep unity in our marriages and partnerships, we have another thing coming. My friend, it starts right here. All right. True oneness is a shift in your mental state. And the mental state of oneness erodes and eradicates systems of oppression and suppression. It leads to the healing of depression, which is where we've been. We've been a depressed society. We've been okay with it. Well, it's okay. It'll get better. How's that working for us? Somebody's going to make it better. Maybe we'll get another JFK or another Barack Obama, or maybe we'll get another Bill Clinton. All right. Maybe we'll get another person to come along that's going to, no. Folks, we have to stop waiting for some kind of a messianical individual to show up. Jesus himself even said, I've been the light of the world, now you're the light of the world. Even St. Paul spoke of Jesus as the firstborn among many. Who are the many? You and me. We are the Christ nature waiting to be expressed in the world. Amen. Folks, it's time for us to be cautious about any religious or spiritual movement that views the world as a battleground filled with enemies to fight, rather than a community of neighbors to love. It's time for us to be wary of those who seek to make the government a tool for divine punishment while ignoring its potential to be a wellspring of mercy, generosity, and compassion. The church is here, whether it's a New Thought church or it's a Christian church, the temples, synagogues, we're all here to stand in the gap and lift our voice right now more than ever and say we decide to be the change that we wish to see in the world. Yeah, but John, you don't understand. I've been in this fight for a long time. Who do you think you are to come and tell me this? So get out of the fight. Because being in the battlefield is, when I say get out of the fight, remove yourself from that battle mentality and move yourself toward a conqueror mentality. See, when you're in the fight, you think you have to be a fighter. But when you rise into your divine nature, you're no longer a fighter because you realize the war has already been won. And all of these little petty battles that have been created by human beings on this planet are not really real. They are an illusion, leading us to delusion. So I'm saying we can rise into our divinity and begin to affect change onto this planet. Oneness is not an escape from a privileged space. It's a radical way of being and loving. It's subversive to our current government and our religious structures. Oneness, radical oneness, is dangerous to those who depend on division and hate. It is subversive to those who are wielding power to create more control and more wealth for themselves. It is dangerous to those who need us to be sick, scared, and separated. It is dangerous to those who love the status quo. And I refuse to believe the status quo is who we have to be. It is time for us to rise up. Pat yourself on the chest and say, rise up. Radical oneness is revolutionary to the systems that are propped up by the illusion of separation. We refuse to be in a state of panic. We refuse to be in a state of sickness and dis-ease and fear. We choose to rise into our higher consciousness. From the White House to the church house, we need a complete dismantling and restructuring of how we're doing life, because people on this planet, including our animals, deserve a better existence. Mother Earth deserves time to heal, and we need to restructure this. We have to restructure the system before it completely destroys. Let me tell you something. The earth is not going away. She's going to continue to be here, but human beings may not be able to survive here if we continue to poison this planet the way we are. Not just with our conveniences, but with our attitudes and with our vibrational frequency that continues to bring negativity into the world. This is a clarion call to wake up. Somebody say, wake up, baby, wake up. And our work is not just personal, it's collective. It's all of us together. Our evolution is not just biological, but it's an expansion of our consciousness. It's truly living in what Charles and Myrtle Fillmore called the superhuman state. We've heard this listen, all of this is out. Quantum physics has told us that we are not victims of our environment, but that we're victorious by choosing our environment. Even science is telling us that we can metamorphosize the human being through how we see it. That you can change the structure of the molecular system of water by what you call it, what you speak to it. And you're 75% water. So when you are speaking down to yourself and you're speaking defeat to yourself, you're literally changing the molecular structure of the water within your body. You can shift it to a higher level. You can call yourself up higher. It's time for us to affirm and confirm the truth of who we are instead of settling for less than the best. This is what radical oneness invites us into. I said last week that what radical oneness redefines diversity, identity, and individualism. That radical oneness destroys the ignorant and weak, fear-based view of God. That radical oneness transforms our purpose. And I say to you today, number one, radical oneness destroys systems of oppression. If we're going to have radical oneness, we're going to need to look for the systems of oppression, and wherever they are, see that they are dismantled. Because any group of people that gets oppressed by a system is operating under a system that is not led by the divine presence, by God. If all people and all beings in existence are expressions of the same divine consciousness, then any system that divides, exploits, or oppresses is fundamentally false. It is not true. So racism and sexism and classism and homophobia, all of those are forms of discrimination. And they do not come from a place of oneness. So wherever you hear it, know that that individual is operating at a lower vibrational frequency. All forms of discrimination are an illusion that leads to delusion, and therefore it is false. It is not truth. They're built on the lie of separation, because if they can keep us separate, they can keep us broke, busted, and disgusted, and not knowing who we're fighting with or what we're fighting for, when truly what it is, we're fighting with our own internal selves. But even the trees are wise enough to know that their branches should not fight amongst themselves. Follow nature, as Jesus said. Notice nature. As Siddhartha said, notice nature. Watch its flow and see how it operates. Colonialism and imperialism collapse under the weight of radical oneness, because both depend on the false belief of superiority, hierarchy, and separation. Oneness causes those systems to collapse. Oneness causes economic injustice to collapse, because economic injustice is unnatural and it is evil. Let's call it what it is. Economic injustice is unnatural and evil. If we're truly one, then hoarding up wealth at the expense of others distorts the divine flow. We're being led right now to believe that those kind of ways of being are natural, and they're not. They're unnatural, they're abnormal, and we shouldn't be normalizing it. I'm trying to say to us that when it comes to the place where there's one or two or three people who have enough wealth on their own to cure world hunger, something is wrong with our system. And the gross things that are going on behind the scenes that are funded by this kind of money, the darkness that transpires behind the scenes and is ignored for the most part by our government because they need their contributions to their candidacies. Oh, see, our government has been bought, it's been purchased for a long time. We've been an oligarchy for a long time. This starts to get uncomfortable, doesn't it? Because it starts to feel like, is this a political talk? No, we've been an oligarchy for a long time. We're just now seeing it on a higher scale than we've ever seen it. And this country was founded, built on ground soaked with the blood of the indigenous people of this land. And the bricks were laid by the hard work, the slave labor of African people who were brought here against their will, in chains, and treated like animals. Until we face our history, we don't even have the right to a new story. Well, I've heard this before, John, I've heard. But how many of us have allowed it to grip our heart enough to realize that we're not that far removed from the way things used to be? And in fact, our incarceration system is just a furtherance of the Jim Crow system. This is when it gets uncomfortable, doesn't it? Number two, oneness shifts power away from external authorities, and it brings us back to our true self. The divine consciousness is present in all beings, and if that's the case, then no one holds the monopoly to truth and to wisdom and to power. This directly challenges religious institutions that claim exclusivity and exclusive access to God. This also stands directly to challenge governments that rule through fear, hierarchy, and division. And furthermore, radical oneness, it dismantles and stands in stark contrast to the systems that benefit a few while exploiting the many. This level of oneness may not be popular because it is a threat to politics as it is, and threat to religious institutions. By the way, I won't name the religious institution, but there is one in particular that's a multi-trillion-dollar business that could also cure world hunger and refuses to. Every social revolutionary throughout time, including Jesus, Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Cesar Chavez, Gandhi, Harriet Tubman, they understood that to have dominion over your mind means taking your power back, and as a result of taking your power back, you become free from external forces. When you free the mind, you begin to free your life. A free mind is to be celebrated, but it is often not tolerated by the powers that are in place. And I say to that, so what? It's time for us to be able to stand against that intolerance and metamorphosize into our true, authentic selves. The game is off. Number three, oneness demands a radical and evolutionary approach to justice. If no one is separate, then no one is an enemy. No one. And this destroys that traditional justice system that is based on punishment, retribution, and exclusion. Did you know in the United States of America we have more people incarcerated in this country than any other democratic country in the world combined? In one country. We warehouse people, we don't rehabilitate people. And it's been an extension of the racist systemic arm. Prisons and punitive justice systems lose their legitimacy under radical oneness. Justice is restorative, redemptive, and it's all about healing and reconciliation. And if it's not, it is not just. Instead, it's been an extension of the Jim Crow system. Here in the United States of America, more human beings are incarcerated in this country than any other. We're warehousing. It's a big business. We've privatized prisons, and so they do better to keep more people behind bars. In fact, they do all kinds of gymnastics to keep people incarcerated. That's why you see money filtrated toward the penitentiary rather than hospitals, rather than health care for all people. Rather than getting us healthy, they want to keep people incarcerated because it's cheaper labor. I'm talking to somebody up in here today. So under oneness, war becomes indefensible. You can't defend war. War is never good. Sometimes it feels like our only option, but is there anybody else that looks back over the history of this country, especially in the last 100 years, and realizes that war has been big business? And we've been creating wars in other countries that we have been taught to hate. We've been told that everybody who is an Arab is a terrorist, essentially that they're all capable of terrorism, and that every Muslim is. Am I the only one that recognizes that that is just a bald-faced lie? We've been taught to downplay the beauty of our Asian brothers and sisters and our African brothers and sisters, and that we're the better country. Folks, we live on a wonderful planet, and all of those cultures I just named are fantastic and beautiful in their own way, and we should get out of our bubble a little bit more because there's no such thing as a well-traveled bigot. Because as you travel and you meet people, you start to realize there are wonderful divine beings in different expressions everywhere. And you start living that diversity. You start living and loving other people of other faiths and other belief systems and orientations. And you begin to see the fragility of the system that has kept you separate from others. It's a thin veil. Just walk through it. Let's lift the veil. When it comes to justice in our prison systems, if it is not restorative, if it is not about healing and restoration and respectability and responsibility, then it is not just. And our justice system is unjust. And it needs to be changed. Well, John, how do we do all of this? By starting now, with recognizing this, awakening, and then listen, because Spirit is lead. Folks, I believe, this is just me. I believe the reason this message is being declared right now, and this is coming forward to the forefront, I believe the reason it's happening is because now is the time for us to literally be a radical change agent in the world. Not just me, us collectively. You see, Jesus was here, and we still talk about Jesus. Is it time for us to get to the place where we stop talking about one personality and we collectively become the Christ? Can we hear the clarion call that's going forward to say collectively be the Christ? This is not the John Scott show. Just because I'm the dude sitting up here in the chair saying these words, it doesn't mean that I'm the one that's supposed to step out and all of a sudden do news conferences and become some kind of a thing. That's not, John Scott's not interested in that. John Scott's interested in how many of you will say, I hear the call, and I'll collect together to create a collective change in the world. Because this is not about one man or one woman. This is about us as a collective choosing to hear this call. And just get in where you fit in, baby. Well, I don't know what to do. I don't either. Because this is new. This is fresh. It's about listening to the wisdom of the universe and following suit. I'm going to read these through because I need to finish up. New Thought's principle of oneness is not just a spiritual comfort. It is a radical, subversive, and transformative force. It demands that we, and here we are. We'll finish up part 2 today. I don't know what's going to happen after this week. We'll find out. Here's our marching orders, okay? It demands that we dismantle injustice wherever we see it because it is an illusion of separation. It demands that we restructure our society to be more equal, compassionate, kind, and loving because hierarchy is false. And that includes in the church, where we've been looking for a man or a woman, a priest or a monk or a guru or a yogi or a pastor. Folks, you are the pastors. You are the preachers. You are the priests. We collectively together are it. I'm just a mouthpiece. It demands that we transform our consciousness because true power is always within. And this is why radical oneness is not passive. It is audacious, it is rebellious, and it is revolutionary, but it is not rebellious for rebellion's sake. It's rebellious because the system is incorrect. It's inaccurate. This is why radical oneness calls us to believe differently than what we have so that we can change the world. And not just believe differently, but live differently. The time for weak, actionless talk is over. Divine action is what's called for now more than ever. And we're being called to this: radical love, radical solidarity, fearless truth, compassionate action, and the creation of a new world built not on fear, but on love, joy, peace, and compassion. And all I have to say is the tools are already in the toolbox. Just open it up and get to using it. because it's time for us to collectively to stop repeating history, face it, and tell a new story. In fact, let's stop looking at history and let's start making her story and history collectively together. And that, my friends, is exactly why there are attempts to silence this message. That's why they don't want you to hear that you're powerful. But if we stand up and we stand together and we decide to create, we'll see the experience of a better world. And there's no power that can stop us if we will collect together. Because where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, the Christ is present. You want the crisis to stop? Allow the Christ to rise within you. We are a generation that is spoken of by the prophets, called a holy nation, a peculiar people, a royal priesthood, set apart. We are the quaking. We are the shaking. We are the awakening. And we choose to live in the powerful of radical oneness because we are one.